Most athletes and healthcare professionals working with athletes know the feeling. You know the feeling of what it's like to finish maybe a grueling marathon, a high stakes basketball game, a long swim session in the pool, or even a tough day on the ice. Maybe it's even that intense training session. Your muscles are burning, your joints are sore, and you are caught up in the mix of both triumph and exhaustion. But here's where the real challenge begins. It's not just in pushing your limits, but in how you recover. Welcome to the Performance Prescription Lab podcast, where we dive deep into the science of sports recovery and sports enhancement. It's Jess, and I'm here with my co host and fellow sports pharmacist, Neil Hahn. In our first season, we covered the recovery foundations of sleep, nutrition, and hydration, as well as ways to manage your body's response to stress. In this episode, we're going to bring you the latest insights, strategies, and tips to manage exercise related inflammation and oxidative stress to help you optimize your performance and your recovery.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Performance Prescription Lab podcast. Today, we want to discuss an often misunderstood aspect of athletic recovery, like Jess said, inflammation and oxidative stress. Inflammation is often painted as the villain in our recovery story and something to be minimized or eradicated. But as you know, inflammation is not just a byproduct of exertion, but a key player in the healing and strengthening process. It's about a continuous seesaw effect. Understanding this can revolutionize the way we approach recovery. So, let's do a little flashback to our episodes on recovery from season one, Jess.
Yeah, there's a whole industry of products and services designed to help athletes to adapt to recovery from both exercise and everyday stress. I mean, we have sports drinks, protein powders, compression therapy, cold plunging, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. I strongly advise you to check out episodes 3 and 4 on recovery in today's space. Recovery is once a neglected aspect of sports. I remember years ago when I played Division 1 volleyball, it was basically something we just never even talked about. But now it has evolved into a scientific process. Yet it's still a battle for many athletes. And I think it's something we also need to address. And I completely intimately understand this is the balance between pushing through and the necessity for rest. I mean, there's even a mental component of resting that is challenging for many athletes. I know I faced it when I was trying to reduce my training from 5 days a week to 4 days a week. And that was for, just a training stressors, but life stressors. I faced the internal battle of resting more, but I also knew the science behind it. I was really excited though when I did change my training that 9 months later, I actually set a world record in Olympic weightlifting for the snatch in my age and weight class category at 41 years old. Neilham, I know you're an athlete yourself. So, how has your mind changed towards recovery since learning more of the science behind it and becoming more competitive as an athlete?
When we're speaking about recovery, we understood that there is a physical recovery, but there is also a biochemical recovery in our bodies, which means inflammation, managing inflammation in your body. So, understanding how inflammation occurs, what it means to your body, what it means to your performance, and how you can manage that so it doesn't have any disrupting effect to your performance or your health in the context of biochemical recovery. That was very helpful for me to understand, to manage my own and my athletes' recovery processes. We are going to speak about the biochemical aspect, the inflammation, in a while. It's hard to manage the physical recovery, biochemical recovery when you are really addicted or very aspired athlete to go for your next run or next race. That's really my personal experience.
Thank you for sharing that. I think you can sum it up with that your recovery is basically as crucial as like your training program itself. So many of us look at our training programs that may be written. I know you worked with a coach for a while and you look at the training programs, but it's very critical to also understand that built into that in a good training program is also adequate recovery and being able to balance the two. And I think understanding and applying recovery techniques may be even more crucial to buffer the risk of overtraining and injuries, as you talked about, and also to promote like whole person health and well-being, because as we all know, athletes are humans first and athletes second. And for sure, recovery is complex, as you talked about. Inflammation is complex. I mean, there's whole semesters in school on just the inflammatory process. And I think it's important for listeners to understand that it's not limited to just our muscles, that this recovery and inflammation also impacts our brain, our nervous system, and our immune system.
Yeah, here I wanted to refer to a quote that I live by, and it's a Latin phrase, reads "Mens sana in corpore sano." Usually, this is translated as a healthy mind in a healthy body.
Yes.
Our body is an entire system as a whole, and when approaching recovery, we should think of it as a complex integrated system. That's why you train and then you recover. So you work for the whole system, but not just one aspect of it. Then, if you understand this integrated system well, your body, and how your body responds to exercise, and how you also get the gains out of exercising regularly, you'll be able to recover efficiently, and then you perform well, you adapt your training, and then you grow and you increase your performance. As I mentioned the quote, then maybe I can give also a little history before
Yeah.
we go into our traditional 101 crash course with Jess. So there is a connection between exercise and inflammation, and this was captivated researchers in the early 20th century when a study showed a spike of white blood cells. This is relevant to our immune system. Uh, of Boston Marathon runners following the race. The term inflammation is frequently used in the sports world to describe recovery, often in a negative light and with a little context. It's very popular to use antioxidant supplements at the moment. Do we use them in a rational way? We'll speak about it in a while in our episode. By definition, inflammation is one of the most central processes required for defense against injuries, infections, illnesses. It is the immune system's response to an irritant, whether that's an allergen, a foreign object, tears in muscle from training or injury, or a splinter in your finger. We are going to please let us bend your mind. Inflammation is also a good thing. So we wanted to explain you why. Jess, I think that's enough from me. I'm gonna hand over to you. And why don't you tell our listeners why through your 101 inflammatory pathways in our bodies, why it's a good thing and why it may be a bad thing in which cases?
Yeah, our famous 101s. So, inflammation can be divided into two general phases. You have the initiation phase, and then you either have inflammation that resolves or it progresses. So, at the initiation of inflammation, you have pro inflammatory pathways and mediators, such as like leukotrienes, cytokines, and prostaglandins that are released at the site of damage. So, in the general population, instead of seeing these names, you actually usually see like pain, heat, and swelling. So this is what happens. And this happens not only with obvious injuries, say like a sprained ankle, but this happens in smaller scales in response to things such as muscle damage following exercise. It's interesting because within 2 hours of resistance training, inflammatory markers in the muscles are shown to be elevated. And studies have even shown that part of the inflammatory response may even last for 5 days in those competing in Ironman triathlons, which God love you for doing that because that's incredible to do an Ironman. When the inflammatory pathway is triggered, white blood cells, as we talked about, what captivated researchers back in the Boston Marathon. So these are going to be monocytes, basophils, eosinophils, and neutrophils. You also have plasma and fluids that begin to accumulate at the site, causing what most of us say is inflammation, but usually it's swelling. And these immune cells start to release other mediators that signal other molecules. So, like histamine, nitrogen derived free radicals, and serotonin that further contribute to the inflammatory events. So once this process is initiated, there are two possible outcomes. You can either have the inflammation resolve and the tissue heal, or you can have progression of the inflammatory process. And it's interesting that the presence of inflammation actually triggers the active process of resolution. So these immune cells actually switch from producing inflammatory mediators to pro resolving mediators that then begin clearing the debris and healing the tissue back to its normal structure. So I think this is a lot of people think that inflammation is bad and you need to suppress it, but it actually helps healing and resolving of inflammation. So it's really interesting. So we hear a lot about acute and probably more so the buzzword chronic inflammation. And this makes a difference as if it's good or bad. So, Neilham, do you want to touch on these differences and kind of explain what athletes need to know about acute versus chronic inflammation?
Sure. As you said, acute inflammatory cascade, it's a protective mechanism in response to exercise, and it's essential for repairing muscle and allowing for growth and adaptations following training. However, athletes need to ensure that acute inflammation doesn't turn chronic. Studies suggest that the presence of certain social, psychological, environmental, and biological factors can prevent the resolution of acute inflammation and, in turn, promote a state of low grade systematic chronic inflammation characterized by the activation of immune components distinct from those activated during an acute immune response. So, if this acute period prolongs due to some factors, then the the degree of the inflammation changes and it advances in a state where it may be harmful. So chronic inflammation is different. This is like a smoldering fire that keeps your immune system in a constant state of red alert. So I guess your body will be in a state of constant fight or flight, which we don't want that. And your white blood cells flood the area and end up attacking nearby healthy tissues as well, healthy organs, and this leads to injuries, illness, mental health issues. You may be overtrained, and then even more risk for chronic health conditions such as diabetes, even Alzheimer's, and that they believe that have underlying inflammatory factors or etiology. So, do you have anything else to add on chronic inflammation, Jess?
Yeah, I think chronic inflammation can creep up on athletes without them really realizing it, especially for those that train at high intensities, they train at heavy intensities, and they really just don't allow their bodies to properly rest or recover. Sometimes this has to do with maybe the coaching and how the training programs are written. It may have to do with the athlete who is constantly wanting to do more, 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 and they see rest as like a four-letter word, as something bad, and that they're going to get behind. I think some of this may have to do also with social media and pressures. And then I also see chronic inflammation kind of creeping up in your multi sport athletes who the coaches aren't talking and they're not really realizing that they're never truly getting rest. And I do a lot of work with high school and college level athletes, and I found this really shocking was when I started realizing that I read a paper on that the about 60% now of Tommy John surgery, so surgery on the elbow, is occurring in 15 to 19-year olds. And this is basically an overuse and injury due to lack of rest, especially for baseball pitchers. So I just shocking that it's so young that people are having Tommy John surgery. Used to be for like Major League Baseball pitchers after pitching for years, and now it's really happening in young athletes, again, due to chronic inflammation and lack of rest and recovery. I think there's many signs and symptoms of chronic inflammation that we as athletes often ignore, and especially those that overtrain and overexert themselves. There's red flags that a lot of us just kind of try to push to the side. So that may be decreased immune system, so increased colds, feel like you're getting sick more often, your joints and your pain and you have aches and pains that just don't seem to like let up, even though you might be doing like PT work or recovering. It's still like it's constantly there. uh, Being fatigued all the time, even after you sleep, having poor sleep, and aching and waking up in the middle of the night. You also start to see in chronic inflammation nutritional deficiencies because your GI tract is inflamed and you're not absorbing it. So, however you want to look at it, I think chronic inflammation will always impact performance. So, Neilham, is there anything else you want to add on inflammation and why we need to avoid making these like broad,
Mhm.
sweeping statements that all inflammation is always bad?
Yes, well, you just described me. Just the one. That's when I was
That
not.
was the old you, Neilham, the
Yes,
old you last
yes,
year.
that's old me, and now I learned my lessons. And we really want to support athletes in not going through that path, and then be informed athletes. But what I can share to your question is, it is important to note that anti-inflammation is not synonymous with pro-resolution.
Yeah.
Anti-inflammation refers to the process of inhibiting pro-inflammatory mediators, which was somehow helpful in some certain cases.
Yeah.
And certain anti-inflammatory approaches can, in fact, prolong the inflammatory process and delay resolution. So, if you block the process, you may get more inflamed.
Yeah.
For example, chronic use of non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, NSAIDs, can promote chronic inflammation and potentially impair muscle and bone development, in addition to the risk of other side effects such as gastrointestinal, renal, or cardiovascular adverse events. NSAIDs, for example, ibuprofen is commonly used. I think it's like a pandemic between among athletes. We are going to speak more
I
about
agree.
these medicines, and we really want our listeners to be informed users because these are not innocent medicines. They come with great risks on your health, and of course, it impairs your performance. So there are some certain protocols that are used by the medical community, and this is why NSAIDs no longer recommended in these protocols. There was a RICE protocol, post-acute injury, like a sprained ankle, and now the protocol is called Peace and Love. And what this means is usually avoid anti-inflammatory medicines as much as possible and use other methods such as, for example, avoiding swelling or maybe educating the athlete to use the right paths in the process to recovery and what should be done post recovery, etc. So we are going to speak more about these medicines because we know you love using them. And anything else that you want to add on inflammation and athletes, maybe in some respect to newer areas of research?
Yeah, I think there's two areas that we're starting to see more and more research on. And one I know sits close to both of us is basically the female athlete.
Mhm.
There's more research coming out about female athletes and the menstrual cycle. And this is truly in its beginning stages because for so many years, female athletes were not included in research.
Yeah.
And the data is starting to show there's an increased level of cytokines released right before the start of the menstrual cycle, and they believe this may contribute to possibly increase of like PMS symptoms, but also inflammation. So this may be why training for some athletes feels harder, or you may feel more bloated or just more inflamed in this time, and you may need a little more rest. But again, very individualized for the female athlete, and new research is coming out, so we can't make broad sweeping statements on this either, but definitely something to be kind of watch as the research comes. And I also think the other area that we're starting to see a lot more research in is on the brain and muscle communication, so your neuromuscular system. And we know as the muscles drain and injure in energy, the brain stops sending messages to them, so the muscles become fatigued. And they believe that this may also be the main culprit of fatigue during illness, is this immune inflammatory response. So, new research believes that there may be a role in cytokines being released during exercise that also affects the processing signals in the brain and leads to like that neuromuscular fatigue where you're like, I know I want to do it, but my muscles just won't do it. So I think those are two interesting areas that we are probably need to watch out for in the coming years of more and more research. But I think it speaks a lot to what we've talked about, is that recovery is more than just our muscles. And you can see why in like your description, Nilham, that inflammation is not always bad. Some situations I think people need to understand may be pro-inflammatory in the start. So say as exercise, we become pro-inflammatory, but the net result actually of exercise is anti-inflammatory if you allow proper recovery. So we do need a certain level of inflammation to allow for exercise adaptations. So, Nilham, could you explain the bright side of inflammation to our listeners so that everyone doesn't think it's all bad?
If you'd like to grow and if you'd like to increase your performance, you need exercise adaptations, and this pro inflammatory response is helpful for your body's adaptation, and you shouldn't suppress that. So, you shouldn't take an anti inflammatory supplement, or I don't know, every time. You don't need that, and then we
Right.
explain why. So it's not the post workout inflammatory response. It's not an undesirable side effect of exercise. It's part of your body's anabolic signaling. So in fact, we'll give you some science here. Acute post exercise spikes in interleukin 6. It's usually an inflammatory protein in your body, were positively correlated with muscle growth, according to one study. It's not surprising than that many studies have found mostly negative effects on muscle growth and exercise performance from taking anti inflammatory drugs or high levels of antioxidants. Interestingly, studies of athletes taking NSAIDs, ibuprofen, for example, have found that NSAID groups had significantly higher levels of markers for severe muscle damage, including C reactive protein, plasma cytokine, and macrophage inflammatory protein. These are inflammatory markers in your body, and this effect increased with higher amounts of ibuprofen intake. So
Wow.
they actually had more inflammatory markers than those who didn't take the NSAIDs. So here the use of medicines come questionable.
Yeah.
There is also one specific use which I commonly see in research and also real life practice. There is also one use of NSAIDs for the prevention of pain. This is misuse or even abuse of the medicines.
Yes.
So these medicines doesn't have such effect. They don't help you prevent the pain. And when you also use these medicines, like if you take an ibuprofen before your exercise, then it may also impair your performance through side effects. You may get dehydrated, for example. You may have more gastrointestinal issues. So, we highly recommend athletes not to use these medicines without the recommendation of a healthcare professional. We'll deep dive into that a little bit more in more detail. We are pharmacists, we love to speak about medicines, and we really hope that you would use them in a rational way so it doesn't impair your performance. So the key takeaway is that inflammation is part of your body's anabolic signaling process, and it aids in muscle growth. For athletes, you want your baseline levels of inflammation to be low, but you also want inflammation to spike as high as possible for a short period, like 12 to 24 hours after each workout, then it resolves. In episode 9, we talked about athletic indicators of recovery. You may also see this episode to understand what are the indicators to understand your inflammation level, so it can help you with your performance. Check out episode 9 so you can be an informed athlete in proactively managing inflammation in your body based on data, your smart watches. So now let's move into how to manage inflammation. how to rationally use these anti-inflammatory medicines, NSAIDs, which we have been talking about, and some evidence-based supplement use information so that you manage inflammation in a rational way. Over to you, Jess.
Yeah. So, an area we touched on was anti inflammatories. And I think both of us can say that we get a lot of questions about NSAIDs, and we often talk a lot about the risk. They're probably one of the most common over the counter pain relievers, and they include, as you mentioned, ibuprofen, but also aspirin, naproxen. Brand names are going to be like Advil and Aleve. And I think there's several reasons why there's misuse of these group of meds in sports. Most athletes don't have an idea of the potential risk associated with them, and they may or may not have received even proper education on the safety and how to use these medications. I feel like athletes often also feel the pressure to perform their best, and pain or inflammation can be often a barrier to achieving their goals. And in most athletes' minds, NSAID can those medications can provide quick relief, making them an appealing option over their long-term consequences. I also think that there's a lot of data out there that is conflicting in the literature about the use of NSAIDs in sports. And some athletes may be misled by claims of these medications that they're safe and effective without considering the potential risk. Sadly, I think a lot of people promote them on social media, even of like, I know when I played sports, people would be like, I took, 8 ibuprofen, I took 10 to get through the game. And like looking back on that now, I just cringe at what we did. Some athletes will self-medicate without consulting professionals, and often sometimes don't know the proper dosing or again potential complications. And in some sports cultures, I think NSAIDs and other pain management medications may be, like I said, even normalized or encouraged due to lack of awareness. So I'm going to let Neil Hum continue in this area of discussion and dive into the risks so that we can be informed providers and athletes.
Okay. So when you pronounce NSAIDs, I realized I've been mispronouncing it. This is how we learned in uni. So I'm going to call it NSAIDs. It's easier to say. That's a very challenging abbreviation, but it's NSAIDs it is. And they are commonly used by athletes to manage pain and inflammation, like you said. They are easy to access. They are OTC, over the counter products. And when they are over the counter, it's thought to be safe. And many people think they don't come with safety risks, but if you just read the product leaflet, you'll be surprised. Especially long-term use of any medicine come with risk, and these are very commonly and often used medicines. So we really want to share you the risks. And again, if your if it's recommended by a medical profession, it's good that you follow what's how it's described in prescription. But if you are self-medicating yourself, you have to be aware of these risks. And if you're not sure, then please consult to a pharmacist or a physician. He or she will definitely help you to understand the risks and then offer you a proper alternative. We also have some alternatives to recommend to you. So sadly, I also see many athletes think that more is also better, like you described. Getting 10 tablets, it's not good. The more is not good in this case, and actually this increases risks in your body. Research also showed that a lot of concern exists about the use of sports for immediate performance and long-term health. So this is sadly called drug abuse or misuse. So I'm gonna share some points supported by data and studies, which can help you to be an informed user. So we are speaking about recovery in this episode, and use of NSAIDs may impede muscle repair and bone healing. A study in medicine and science in sports and exercise found that NSAIDs could reduce muscle protein synthesis, impairing muscle growth and repair. Another study in the Journal of Bone and Joint Surgery suggested that NSAIDs might delay bone healing, and slower recovery and healing can lead to prolonged downtime and increased risk of further injury. NSAIDs might blunt the adaptive response to training, which we explained. Research in the Journal of Physiology indicated that NSAIDs could interfere with the body's ability to adapt to exercise by inhibiting the necessary inflammatory response needed for muscle adaptation. Again, they can cause gastrointestinal problems such as ulcers, bleeding, and gastritis. And another study supporting that in Journal of Applied Physiology found that 70% of long distance runners reported GI symptoms after taking NSAIDs during races. There is also one study that I would like to refer to, that's from Ironman Brazil, which was done in 2008. A study following the competition, the race, found that athletes who used NSAIDs for preventing injury, which was a misuse, had more gastrointestinal distress and more cramps compared to non-users. So this is an important data to show that, again, drug misuse may be risky rather than managing pain in different ways.
Yeah.
The other, there are risks of long-term use, and also NSAIDs can impair your kidney functions, which is very important because dehydration during intense physical activity is a huge risk, and this is related to your kidneys. A supporting research from Clinical Journal of Sports Medicine showed that NSAIDs significantly increase the risk of acute kidney injury in athletes, particularly in endurance sports like ultramarathons or Ironmans. And another risk, huge risk, come with long-term use of NSAIDs is the risk of cardiovascular events such as heart attacks or strokes. The American Heart Journal reported that regular use of NSAIDs is linked to a higher incidence of cardiovascular issues in both athletes and the general population. Is there anything else that you would like to add so we can increase awareness for of our listeners?
I was going to say, I think you did a amazing job covering all that. And I think it speaks to just the amount of references you gave, that it is widespread. It's
Yeah,
not just one area that you see it from the American Heart Association. You see it in sports medicine. You see it in like dietitian magazines about the risk of these medications. And I think it just speaks to that there is a widespread risk that a lot of people don't understand. And you often see, I feel like the overuse of NSAIDs can also um, mask can also help on masking the pain and inflammation, and it prevents the athletes from properly getting diagnosed and treated for underlying issues, which could lead to further complications or more long-term damage. Something a lot of people don't talk about is, using it and masking that for so long, you could actually have been treated earlier and not needed to take as much time off for say. So that is just one area I think a lot of people overlook, is that, and also the risk of NSAIDs and the risk of interactions with other medications or supplements. They can cause some blood thinning. So if you're on a blood thinner, there or GI issues like you led to, so increase a risk of bleeding from ulcers. This can lead to potentially negative side effects, decrease effectiveness of other treatments, and actually needing more medications. While NSAIDs can provide temporary relief, their potential negative impacts on performance and health should definitely not be overlooked. Athletes should use NSAIDs only, I think, as a medical professional directs them to, for the shortest amount of duration possible, and monitor their body closely. Also, seek and ask questions about, is there alternative treatments if possible? So, Neilham, while we're on that question, what are some alternatives that our listeners could use instead of NSAIDs?
yes, we made NSAIDs boogeyman, so
Yeah,
we should give some
some
alternatives.
alternatives.
There are always some solutions, and I want to start with fish oils, especially omega 3, which consists of IPA and DHA. How do you pronounce it, by the way?
EPA. I just say the letters on this one. Usually they don't shorten this one. So it's
Oh,
EPA and DHA.
okay, great. Perfect. Thanks for the support and
You're
hint.
welcome.
And yes, you can get fish oil from your diet by eating fish, but most of us don't eat enough fish or the right kinds of fish that can get the necessary amount. And speaking of omega 3 oils, we should understand that there should be a balance in our body of omega 6 and omega 3 fats, which keeps our cells healthy. But when the balance is more towards omega 6, and these fats usually come from processed food, fried food, etc., omega 3 comes from, for example, more Mediterranean diet. And if you have the balance more towards the omega 6, then this may put your body into an inflammatory state. So we need to increase the amount of omega 3 in our diet. And through omega 3 intake, we can change the fatty acid composition of our cells. Then this affects the production of compounds that mediate inflammation. So it turns the balance towards a non-inflammatory state. Fish oils also this prevents inflammation. In studies, fish oils also have been shown to help with aerobic metabolism, lowering cholesterol, and relieving DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness. So directly linked to the performance, athletic performance. High doses of fish oil, 2 to 4 grams daily over 30 days, lower pain, inflammation, especially for athletes. I like to use a 2 to 1 EPA DHA ratio for anti inflammatory purposes, but especially for post concussion. Because this has directly have beneficial effects on the brain inflammation, so it has neuroprotective effects. And then the difference between taking NSAIDs and fish oils is that fish oils won't work in 20 minutes. They have to be in your system for a few weeks, so consistent use helps. And fish oils are also neuroprotective, as I mentioned. So if you're in a contact sport, this is going to be really helpful for managing inflammatory response post concussion. We explained the high doses, but the pro tip I can share is that if you're trying to select the right supplement, target at least 750 milligrams EPA plus DHA. This is the minimum amount. Don't go for the amount of the fish oil. Calculate the EPA and DHA that gives you the right dose. When there is the right dose, then you're going to get the right effect, right inflammatory effect. And in Europe, there is a certification called EFOS. I don't know how it works in US, but this sort of certification shows that the fish oil is pure and it's safe, free from heavy metals. So it's good to go for products that is also safe, because we recommend you to use fish oils concurrently, days after days.
Yeah.
And I can say, this is a question I usually get: would I gain weight if I take omega 3 supplements? No, you won't. The calorie that is given by an omega 3 supplement is really low, so it wouldn't impair your diet. And also get questions from athletes whether they can use omega 3 supplement during summer. That's perfectly fine. You still eat fish during summer, so it's the same thing. And these are some pro tips that can help you to be a rational supplement user. Jess, what's the next supplement that can be used in replacing
Yeah.
NSAIDs?
I think the next popular one after omega 3s is going to be curcumin, which can actually help with pain relief and inflammation for athletes at the time of taking the supplement, and can probably be a better choice for more acute pain relief. Curcumin, which comes from the turmeric plant, works as an antioxidant and an anti inflammatory, and it works by blocking the pain messages sent to the brain. Studies have shown that curcumin is especially effective for people with like rheumatoid arthritis and chronic pain. The downfall, I think, with curcumin is that it's not easily absorbed into our body. So basically, the bioavailability is very low. And some companies have spent thousands of dollars of money making curcumin that has the highest level of bioavailability. This may cost a little more than other products, but this is actually one time that they're worth the price. So here are a few tips to help you may want to look for when you're choosing a product that will help increase the availability in our body. If they combine the curcumin with an adjuvant like pepperine, which is black pepper, this helps increase the absorption. You can look for liposomal curcumin, which means it's kind of emulsified in a fat, which helps with the absorption. Curcumin nanoparticles, or even a curcumin phospholipid complex. So all of these are ways that you could help absorb the curcumin better into your body. One study suggests that about 2 grams of curcumin had a pain relieving effect in subjects with acute pain. At this dose, the activity was higher than that associated with 500 milligrams of acetaminophen or Tylenol. The study went on to quote that the analgesic effect of the dose achieved significant levels only 2 hours after administration, which was similar to that observed as acetaminophen. In contrast, the NSAID in the study was actually more rapidly acting, with slightly stronger pain relief being reported 1 hour after administration. But as we've talked about, they did report significant side effects with the NSAID. So this study supported the use of 2 grams or possibly higher needed for inflammation of curcumin for pain relief as a potential alternative to NSAIDs or acetaminophen. So, our general recommendation is to take 500 milligrams of curcumin in one of the more bioavailable forms 3 to 4 times a day to help with acute pain relief. And athletes can also take 500 milligrams to lower inflammation and pain relief as more like a chronic, consistent daily basis. Again, a pro tip from us is because curcumin has low bioavailability, you can't just buy turmeric and add it to your food and expect it to work and get the same effect. You do want to try, if you do want to try it, you can use shaved turmeric or turmeric powder and add black pepper to the mix to help activate the compounds, and add such a fat such as like coconut milk or coconut oil to help the mixture's absorption. So, Nilham, what's next?
That sounds yummy, by the way.
Yeah.
My next is Boswellia serrata. I think it's a gift of nature. It's also
Yes.
known as frankincense, and it's a tree found in dry and rocky areas of Africa, southern regions of the Arabian Peninsula, and eastern India. So it was used by Egyptian during ancient Egyptian times, or as an Ayurvedic medicine. It was named after a British botanist, Johann Boswell, who discovered the tree in 1846. So I found the name very interesting. So I really wanted to share that information about history.
I
But
love that.
yeah, what about its effects in anti-inflammatory perspective? So it's Boswellia is a excellent anti-inflammatory supplement herbal medicine, and it has this effect from its boswellic acid content. Several studies have demonstrated that boswellia can help significantly decrease the pain experienced by arthritis patients. More specifically, for those who geek on this stuff, these boswellic acids have been shown to suppress some of the key inflammatory markers, which we described earlier in the podcast. As such, boswellia acts as a potent natural anti-inflammatory that can be used to manage athletic recovery and inflammatory processes. Some research has shown boswellia to be an effective treatment for relieving pain associated with osteoarthritis, and two studies indicated that 90 days of treatment with 100 milligrams of enriched Boswellia serrata extract improved symptoms of osteoarthritis compared to placebo. Boswellia is available in a variety of forms, including oral supplements and topical creams. They smell really good, in my opinion. Frankincense essential oil is also an excellent remedy for pain. You may consider using aromatherapy products that contain frankincense. And studies show that Boswellia extracts may interact with certain medications, specifically NSAIDs like ibuprofen or drugs that are substrates of pea glycoprotein. This is for our healthcare professional listeners. So, if you're an athlete, it's always best to speak with your healthcare provider before using, and remember that if something is herbal, it doesn't mean that it's entirely safe. In Boswellia's case, it interacts with some medications. And I can give you some pro tips on the dosage. There is no standard dosage in the case of Boswellia. The use of treatment will dictate the dosage because there are different indications. But there is a general dosing guideline that suggests supplementing 300 to 500 milligrams orally 2 to 3 times a day. And the Arthritis Foundation also suggests that supplementation should consist of 300 to 400 milligrams 3 times per day of a product containing at least 60% boswellic acids, and it can decrease inflammation when applied topically. So, what's your next supplement, Jess?
So the next one I think is going to maybe catch some listeners a little off guard because it's not something a lot of people talk about. But there's a powerful anti-inflammatory in one of the foods that we eat, and it's ginger. Ginger has, in fact, been shown to be more effective than drugs like ibuprofen for pain relief, according to a 2013 study published in the Journal of Arthritis. The study showed that while prescriptive medications like ibuprofen can prevent inflammatory compounds from forming, ginger blocks the formation of the inflammatory compounds, the actual formation of the prostaglandins and leukotrienes. In addition, ginger also contains powerful antioxidant compounds that help ease existing inflammation, as well as breaking down acidity in the joint fluid. So this study made use of both heated and raw ginger. So try adding some of that to your food, or even making it into a like a healthy tea. Ginger is also available as a capsule or a tincture or in the form of essential oils, and it can be applied topically for pain relief. Ginger also is great at reducing gut inflammation and digestive issues. So, definitely something to consider adding to your diet because we do like food first approach. So, ginger is a great tip. I'm going to do a couple rapid fire ones of things that these may be newer or less used products. And cannabinoids would be another one. So while they're this use will be based on legality. Some areas of the U.S. or some areas of the world may have access to them, while others don't. Also, the governing body in which you compete under may have different regulations. But I do want to address this quickly, as there's an ever increasing body of research into the pain relieving abilities of cannabinoids. I also see arnica, which is a flowering plant from the sunflower family. And arnica has been used as a homeopathic medication to reduce inflammation. Arnica can be taken orally, it can be applied topically, and I also see it used for acute traumas such as bruises, soreness, and even into arthritis. So, Neilham, what are some from your practice that you also see that may be a little newer or less common?
The next one I can share is bromelain. It's an enzyme extract derived from the stems of pineapples. The extract has a long history of use as a natural anti-inflammatory, and there have been studies that correlated the use of bromelain with reduction of symptom severity in osteoarthritis. And remember, they are coming from the stems of pineapples, so if you just eat a pineapple, you wouldn't get the same effect. So just to note that. The next one is capsaicin cream that is made of from hot peppers, and this medication is used to treat minor aches, pains in the muscles and joints such as arthritis, backache, and sprains. We have lots of brands. I guess all of us have been through that. The burning sensation coming from capsaicin, that is also a very good anti-inflammatory and painkiller compound. How it works is that it decreases a certain natural substance in your body, which is called substance P, sometimes called as pain substance as well,
Yep.
which helps pass pain signals to the brain. So it's all about sensation. And when you use any compounds that has capsaicin, this hot pepper cream or any type of product, don't touch your eyes, your nose, your mouth, genitals after use. I'm sure those who touched will have the same feeling. I just burned my eyes a few days ago. It causes irritation, it causes burning, and it may be also risky to your if your skin is sensitive. So
Yeah.
better to test it on a small area and then use just to make sure you don't have any allergy. The next one I want to share is cryotherapy or cold exposure. Cryotherapy can get extreme. Whole body cryotherapy chambers can plummet to minus 200 Fahrenheit. This is roughly minus 95 Celsius degrees. There are much simpler and less expensive ways to engage in cold, which is cold exposure through cold water immersion, for example, or just dip into a cold lake or sea. Many will consider this as more of a muscular and nervous system reboot. The benefits of cryotherapy or cold exposure include an enhanced immune system, increased cell longevity, reduced levels of inflammatory factors. Currently, there aren't any established protocols for times or temperatures for anti inflammatory effects. But what I see is like a level of 13 to 16 Celsius degrees are sometimes recommended by sports physicians, but really to make sure this is not done every day because that you would also have a risk of suppressing the inflammatory effect as well.
Yep.
So let's wrap up this episode just with take home messages from the entire episode.
Yeah. I think take home messages would be inflammation is inherently a protective mechanism that the body possesses to keep it safe and healthy. And but when inflammation becomes excessive and chronic, it can be hugely problematic, especially for athletes. The thing is, a lot of athletes don't even know they're inflamed or they disregard the signs and symptoms of inflammation and under recovery. I think people need to remember that the acute inflammatory cascade in response to exercise is essential for repairing muscles and allowing growth and adaptations following bouts of resistance training or prolonged endurance activities. However, what athletes need to be mindful of is that acute inflammation does not turn into chronic inflammation. Lastly, I think athletes need to pay attention to absolutely every sign that their body is showing when it comes to things like inflammation. And I hope that this episode has given you the tools you need to help your performance and help keep your inflammation in check. Neilham?
I have some take home messages to add,
Yeah.
beautiful messages from yours. And we spoke about many supplements that are herbal supplements. And we really care about supplement safety. And if you're also a competing athlete, you should make sure that these supplements are coming from trusted sources. And herbal doesn't mean it's just safe. They have a dose, they have a period that should be used, and they even come with some side effects. So when you're having a herbal supplement, make sure you consult to a pharmacist, a physician, a healthcare professional to guide you on the rational use of these supplements. And as we explained, anti-inflammatory response can be helpful for your adaptation to exercise and to your performance. So don't just jump into any anti-inflammatory medicine or a supplement so you wouldn't suppress this helpful inflammatory response in your body. We are sports pharmacists, and our mission is to provide accurate and evidence based information to optimize your health and performance. And as I just explained, when it comes to your health and well being choices, make sure you consult your physician or your pharmacist, prioritize your safety, and always make informed decisions. Thank you very much for joining us today on the Performance Prescription Lab podcast. We look forward to sharing more valuable scientific and actionable insights in our next episode. Until then, don't let inflammation be the reason that your performance declines. Keep yourself hydrated, rested, nourished, and repairing well. Take care, athletes and our dear listeners. Bye.